The purpose of science is to ask, and when possible, answer questions. Even questions some people would prefer not to be answered. Lifeline by Robert Heinlin. Read by Karl. The chairman rapped loudly for order. Gradually, the catcalls and boos died away as several self-appointed sergeants-at-arms persuaded a few hot-headed individuals to sit down. The speaker on the rostrum by the chairman seemed unaware of the disturbance. His bland, fatally insolent face was impassive. The chairman turned to the speaker and addressed him in a voice in which anger and annoyance were barely restrained. "Dr. Pinero," the doctor was faintly stressed, "I must apologize to you for the seemingly unseemly outburst during your remarks. I'm surprised that my colleagues should so forget the dignity to men of science as to interrupt the speaker. No matter," he paused and set his mouth, "no matter how great the provocation." Pinero smiled in his face, a smile that was in some way an open insult. The chairman visibly controlled his temper and continued, "I am anxious to program like it could decently and in order. I want you to finish your remarks. Nevertheless, I must ask you to refrain from confronting our intelligence with ideas that any educated man knows to be fallacious. Please confine yourself to your discovery, if you have made one." Pinero spread his fat white hands, palms down. "How can I possibly put a new idea into your heads if I do not first remove your delusions?" The audience stirred and muttered. Someone shouted from the rear of the hall, "Throw the charlatan out. We've had enough." The chairman pounded his gavel. "Gentlemen, please." Then to Pinero, "Must I remind you are not a member of this body and that we did not invite you?" Pinero's eyes lifted. "So? I seem to recall an invitation on the letterhead of the academy." The chairman chewed his lower lip for replying, "True. I wrote an invitation myself. But it was the request of one of the trustees, a fine public-spirited gentleman, but not a scientist, not a member of the academy." Pinero smiled his irritating smile. "So, I should have guessed. Oh, old Bidwell, not so, of Amalgamated Life Insurance? And he wanted his trained seals to expose me as a fraud, yes? For if I can tell a man the day of his own death, no one will buy his pretty policies. But how can you expose me if you will not listen to me first? Even supposing you had the wit to understand me. Bah! He sent jackals to tear down a lion." He deliberately turned his back on them. The muttering of the crowd swelled, and it took on a vicious tone. The chairman cried vainly for order. Then arose a figure in the front row. "Mr. Chairman!" The chairman grasped the opening and shouted, "Gentlemen, Dr. Van Reinschmidt has the floor." The commotion died away. The doctor cleared his throat, smoothed the forelock of his beautiful white hair, and thrust one hand into a side pocket of his shortly tailored trousers. He assumed his woman's club manner. "Mr. Chairman, fellow members of the Academy of Science, let us have tolerance. Even a murderer has the right to have his say before the state exacts its tribute. Should we do less? Even though one may be intellectually certain of the verdict? I grant Dr. Pinero every consideration that should be given by this august body to any unaffiliated colleague, even though," he bowed slightly in Pinero's direction, "we may not be familiar with the university which bestowed his degree. If what he has to say is false, it cannot harm us. If what he has to say is true, we should know it." His mellow, cultivated voice rolled on, soothing and calming. "If an eminent doctor's manner appears a trifle inurbane for our tastes, we must bear in mind the doctor may be from a place, or a stratum, not so meticulous in these little matters. Now our good friend and benefactor has asked us to hear this person and carefully assess the merit of his claims. Let us do so with dignity and decorum." He sat down to a rumble of applause, comfortably aware he enhanced his reputation as an intellectual leader. Tomorrow the papers would again mention the good sense and persuasive personality of America's handsomest university president. Who knows? Perhaps old Bidwell would come through with that swimming pool donation. When the applause had ceased, the chairman turned to where the center of the disturbance sat, hands folded over his little round belly, face serene. "Will you continue, Dr. Pinero?" Why should I? The chairman shrugged his shoulders. You came for that purpose. Pinero rose. So true, so very true. But was I wise to come? Is there anyone here who has an open mind, who can stare a bare fact in the face without blushing? I think not. Even that so beautiful gentleman who asked me to hear me out has already judged me and condemned me. He seeks order, not truth. Suppose truth defies order. Will you accept it? Will you? I think not. Still, if I do not speak, you will win your point by default. The little man in the street will think that your little men have exposed me, Pinero, as a hoaxer, a pretender. That does not suit my plans. I will speak. I will repeat my discovery. In simple language, I invented a technique to tell how long a man will live. I can give you advanced billing of the angel of death. I can tell you when the black camel will kneel at your door. In 5 minutes' time of my apparatus, I can tell you, any of you, how many grams of sand are still left in your hourglass. He paused and folded his arms across his chest. For a moment, no one spoke. The audience grew restless. Finally, the shaman intervened. You aren't finished, Doctor? What more is there to say? You haven't told us how your discovery works. Pinero's eyebrows shot up. You suggest I should turn over the fruits of my work for children to play with. This is dangerous knowledge, my friend. I keep it from the man who understands it myself. He tapped his chest. How are we to know you have anything back of your wild claims? So simple. You send a committee to watch me demonstrate. If it works, fine. You admit it and tell the world so. If it does not work, I am discredited and will apologize. Even I, Pinero, will apologize. A slender, stoop-shouldered man stood in the back of the hall. The chairman recognized him and spoke. Mr. Chairman, how can the eminent doctor seriously propose such a course? Expect us to wait around for 20 or 30 years for someone to die and prove his claims? Pinero ignored the chairman and answered directly. Pah! Such nonsense. You are so ignorant of statistics, you do not know that in any large group there is at least one who will die in the immediate future? I make you a proposition. Let me test each one of you in this room, and I will name the man who will die within a fortnight. Yes, in the day and hour of his death. He glanced fiercely around the room. Do you accept? Another figure got to his feet, a portly man who spoke in measured syllables. I, for one, cannot countenance such an experiment. As a medical man, I have noted with sorrow the plain marks of serious heart trouble in many of our elder colleagues. If Dr. Pinero knows these symptoms, as he may, were he to select his victims one of the number, the man so selected will be likely to die on schedule, whether the distinguished speaker's mechanical egg timer works or not. Another speaker backed him up at once. Dr. Shepard is right. Why should we waste time on voodoo tricks? It's my belief this person who calls himself Dr. Pinero wants to use this body to give his statements authority. If we participate in this farce, we play into his hands. I don't know what his racket is, but you can bet he has figured out some way to use this for advertising for his schemes. I move, Mr. Chairman, we proceed with the regular business. The motion carried by acclamation, but Pinero did not sit down. Amidst cries of order, order, he shook his untidy head at them and had his say. Barbarians, imbeciles, stupid dolts. Your kind have blocked the recognition of every great discovery since time began. Such ignorance are enough to start Galileo spinning in his grave. That fat fool down there twiddling his elk stew called himself a medical man. Witch doctor would be a better term. That little bald-headed runt over there. You style yourself a philosopher, prate about life and time in your neat categories. What do you know of either one? How can you ever learn when you won't examine the truth when you have a chance? Fa! He spat upon the stage. You call this an Academy of Science? I call it an Undertaker's Convention, interested only in embalming the ideas of your red-blooded predecessors. He paused for breath and was grasped aside by two members of the platform committee and rushed out the wings. Several reporters arose hastily from the press table and followed him. The chairman declared the meeting adjourned. The newspaper one caught up with him as he was going up at the stage door. He walked with a light, springy step and whistled a little tune. There was no trace of the belligerency he had shown a moment before. They crowded about him. How about an interview, Doc? What do you think of modern education? You certainly told him. What are your views on life after death? Take off your hat, Doc, and look at the birdie. He grinned at them all. One at a time, boys, and not so fast. I used to be a newspaper man myself. How about coming off to my place, and we'll talk about it. A few minutes later, they were trying to find places to sit down in Panero's messy bed living room and lighting his cigars. Panero looked around and beamed. What'll it be, boys? Scotch or bourbon? When that was taken care of, he got down to business. Now, boys, what do you want to know? Lay it on the line, Doc. Have you got something or haven't you? Most assuredly, I have something, my young friend. And tell us how it works. That guff you handed the prof won't get you anywhere now. Please, dear fellow, it's my invention. I expect to make some money with it. Would you have me give it away to the first person who asks for it? See here, Doc. You got to give us something if you expect to get a break in the morning papers. What do you use? A crystal ball? No, not quite. Would you like to see my apparatus? Sure. Now we're getting somewhere. He ushered them into the adjoining room and waved his hand. There it is, boys. The massive equipment that met their eyes vaguely resembled a medico's office X-ray gear. Beyond the obvious fact that it used electrical power, and some of the dials were calibrated from familiar terms, casual inspection gave no clue to its actual use. What's the principle, Doc? Panero pursed his lips and considered. No doubt you're all familiar with the truism that life is electrical in nature? Well, that truism isn't worth a damn, but it will help to give you an idea of the principle. You've also been told that time is the fourth dimension. Maybe you believe it, perhaps not. It has been said so many times it has ceased to have any meaning. It's simply a cliche that windbags use to impress fools. But I want you to try to visualize it now and try to feel it emotionally. He stepped up to one of the reporters. Suppose we take you as an example. Your name is Rogers, is it not? Very well. You're a space-time event having duration 4 ways. You are not quite 6 feet tall. You're about 20 inches wide and perhaps 10 inches thick. In time, that stretches behind you more of this space-time event reaching to perhaps 1916, of which we see a cross-section here at right angles to the time axis and as thick as the present. At the far end is a baby, smelling of sour milk and drooling its breakfast on its bib. At the other end lies, perhaps, an old man someplace in the 1980s. Imagine this space-time event which we call Rogers as a long pink worm, continuous through the years. One end is its mother's womb, the other at the grave. Stretches past us here. In the cross-section we see appears as a single discrete body. But that is illusion. There is physical continuity to this pink worm enduring through the years. As a matter of fact, there is physical continuity in this concept to the entire race, for these pink worms branch off from other pink worms. In this fashion, the race is like a vine where branches intertwine and send out shoots. Only by taking a cross-section of the vine will we fall into the error of believing that the shootlets were discrete individuals. He paused and looked around their faces. One of them, a dour, hard-bitten chap, put in a word. It's all very pretty, Panero, if true, but where does that get you? Panero favored him with an unresentful smile. Patience, my friend. I ask you to think of life as electrical. Now think of our long pink worm as a conductor of electricity. You've heard perhaps of the fact that electrical engineers can, by certain measurements, predict the exact location of a break in a transatlantic cable without ever leaving the shore. I do the same. By applying my instruments to the cross-section here in this room, I can tell when the break occurs. That is to say, when death takes place. Or, if you like, I can reverse the connection and tell you the date of your birth. But that is uninteresting. You already know that. The dour individual sneered. Caught you, Doc. What you said about the race being like a vine of pink worms is true. You can't tell birthdays connection with the race continuous at birth. Your electrical conductor reaches on back to the mother and to a man's remote ancestors. Panero beamed. True and clever, my friend. But you have pushed the analogy too far. It's not done in a precise manner in which one measures the length of an electrical conductor. In some ways, it's more like measuring the length of a long corridor by bouncing an echo off the far end. At birth, there's a sort of twist in the corridor, and by proper calibration, I can detect the echo from that twist. There's just one case in which I can get no determinate reading when a woman is actually carrying a child. I can't sort out her lifeline from that of the unborn infant. What's he approving? Certainly, my dear friend. Will you be a subject? One of the others spoke up. He's called your bluff, Luke. Put up or shut up. I'm game. What do I do? First, write the date of your birth on a sheet of paper and hand it to one of your colleagues. Luke complied. Now what? Remove your outer clothing and step upon these scales. Now tell me, were you ever very much thinner or much fatter than you are now? No? What did you weigh at birth? 10 pounds? A fine bouncing baby boy. You don't come so big anymore. What is all this flubdubbery? I'm trying to approximate the average cross-section of our long pink conductor, my dear Luke. Now you seat yourself here. Now place an electrode in your mouth. No, it won't hurt you. The voltage is quite low, less than 1 microvolt, but I must have a good connection. The doctor left him and went behind his apparatus, where he lowered a hood over his head before touching his controls. Suddenly exposed dials came to life and a low humming came from the machine. He stopped and the doctor popped out of his little hideaway. I guess sometime in February 1912. It was a piece of paper with the date. It was produced and unfolded. The custodian read, February 22nd, 1912. Stillness of fellows was broken by a voice from the edge of the little group. Doc, can I have another drink? The tension relaxed and several spoke at once. Try to me, Doc. Me first, Doc. I'm an orphan. I really want to know. How about it, Doc? Give us all a little loose play. He smilingly complied, ducking in and out of the hood like a gopher from its hole. When they all had twin slips of paper to prove the doctor's skill, Luke broke a long silence. How about showing how you predict death, Doc? If you wish, he will try it. No one answered. Several of them nudged Luke forward. Go ahead, smart guy. You asked for it. Allowed himself to be seated in a chair. Pinero changed some of the switches and entered the hood. When the humming ceased, he came out, rubbing his hands briskly together. What's all the rest to see, boys? Kind of first story? Hey, what about a prediction? When does Luke get his 30? Luke faced him. Yeah, how about it? What's your answer? Pinero looked pained. Gentlemen, I'm surprised at you. I give the information for a fee. Besides, it is professional confidence. Never tell anyone about the client who consults me. I don't mind. Go ahead and tell them. I'm really very sorry. I must refuse. I agreed only to show you how, not to give you the results. Luke ground the butt of a cigarette into the floor. It's a hoax, boys. Probably looks like every reporter in town just to be ready to pull this. It won't wash, Pinero. Pinero gazed at him sadly. Are you a maid, my friend? No. You have anyone dependent on you? Any close relatives? No. Why? Do you want to adopt me? Pinero shook his head sadly. I'm so very sorry for you, my dear Luke. You will die before tomorrow. Within 20 minutes of Pinero's strange prediction, Timmins was struck by a falling sign while walking down Broadway towards the offices of the Daily Herald, where he was implied. Dr. Pinero declined to comment, but confirmed the story that he predicted Timmins' death by means of his so-called chronovitameter. Chief of Police Roy, does the future worry you? Don't waste money on fortune tellers. Consult Dr. Hugo Pinero, bioconsultant, to help you plan for the future by valuable scientific methods. No hocus pocus, no spirit messages. $10,000 bond posted or forfeit to back our predictions. Circular on request. Sands of Time Incorporated. Majestic Building, Site, Suite 700. Legal notice. To whom it may concern, greetings. I, John Cabot Winthrop III, of the firm Winthrop, Dittmers, and Winthrop, attorneys at law, do affirm that Hugo Pinero of this city did hand to me $10,000 in lawful money in the United States, and instruct me to place in escrow with a chartered bank of my selection with escrow instructions as follows. The entire bond shall be forfeit and shall forthwith be paid to the first client of Hugo Pinero and or Sands of Time Incorporated, who shall exceed his life tenure as predicted by Hugo Pinero by 1%, or to the estate of the first client who shall fail of such predicted tenure in a like amount, whichever occurs first in point of time. I do further affirm I have this day placed this bond on escrow with the above related instructions with the Equitable First National Bank of this city. Subscribed and sworn, John Cabot Winthrop III. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Radio Audience. Let's go to press. Flash. Hugo Panero, the miracle man from nowhere, has made his thousandth death prediction without a claimant for the reward he posted for anyone who catches him failing to call the turn. With 13 of his clients already dead, it is mathematically certain he has a private line to the main office of the old man with the scythe. That is one piece of news I don't want to know before it happens. Your coast-to-coast correspondent will not be a client of Prophet Panero. The judge's watery baritone cut through the stale air of the courtroom. Please, Mr. Weems, let us return to our buttons. This court granted your prayer for a temporary restraining order, and now you ask it to be made permanent. In rebuttal, Mr. Panero claims you were prevented no cause and asks the injunction be lifted, and order your client to cease from attempts to interfere with what Panero describes as a simple lawful business. As you are not addressing a jury, please omit the rhetoric and tell me in plain language why I should not grant his prayer. Mr. Weems jerks his chin nervously, making his flabby gray do-up drag across his high stiff collar, and resumed. May it please the Honorable Court, I represent the public. Just a moment. I thought you were appearing for amalgamated life insurance. I am, Your Honor, in a formal sense. In a wider sense, I represent several of the major assurance, fiduciary, and financial institutions, your stockholders and policyholders, who constitute a majority of the citizenry. In addition, we feel that we protect the interests of the entire population. I thought that I've represented the public, observed the judge dryly. I'm afraid I must regard you as appearing for your client of record. But continue. What is your thesis? The elderly barrister attempted to swallow his Adam's apple and began again. Your Honor, we contend that these are two separate reasons why this conjunction should be made permanent, and further, each reason is sufficient alone. In the first, this person is engaged in the practice of soothsaying, an occupation prescribed both in common law and statute. He is a common fortune teller, a vagabond charlatan who preys on the gullibility of the public. He's cleverer than the ordinary gypsy palm reader, astrologer, or table tipper, and to the same extent more dangerous. He makes false claims of modern scientific methods to give a spurious dignity to his thaumaturgy. We have here in court leading representatives of the Academy of Science to give expert witnesses as to the absurdity of his claims. In the second place, even if these persons' claims were true, granting for the sake of argument such an absurdity, Mr. Weems permitted himself a thin-lipped smile, we contend that his activities are contrary to the public interest in general, and unlawfully injurious to the interests of my client in particular. We are prepared to produce numerous exhibits with the legal custodians to prove this person did publish, or caused to have published, utterances urging the public to dispense with the priceless boon of life insurance to the great detriment of their welfare and the financial damage of my client. Panero rose in his place. Your Honor, may I say a few words? What is it? I believe I can simplify the situation if permitted to make a brief analysis. Your Honor, cut in Weems, this is most irregular. Patience, Mr. Weems, your interests will be protected. Seems to me we need more light and less noise in this matter. Dr. Panero can shorten the proceedings by speaking at this time. I'm inclined to let him. Proceed, Doctor. Thank you, Your Honor. Taking the last of Mr. Weems' points, I am prepared to stipulate I publish the utterances he speaks of. One moment, Doctor. You've chosen to act as your own attorney. Are you sure you're competent to protect your own interests? I'm here to chance it, Your Honor. Our friends here can easily prove what I stipulate. Very well, you may proceed. I will stipulate that many persons have canceled life insurance policies as a result thereof, but I challenge them to show that anyone doing so has suffered any loss or damage therefrom. It is true the amalgamator has lost business to my activities, but as a natural result of my discovery, which has made their policies as obsolete as the bow and arrow. If an injunction is granted on that ground, I should set up a coal oil lamp factory, then ask for an injunction against the Edison and General Electric companies to forbid them to manufacture incandescent bulbs. will stipulate I am engaged in the business of making predictions of death, but I deny that I am practicing magic, black, white, or rainbow colored. If to make predictions by method of scientific accuracy is illegal, then the actuaries of amalgamators have been guilty for years in that they predict the exact percentage that would die each year in any given large group. I predict death retail. The amalgamator predicts it wholesale. If their actions are legal, how can mine be illegal? I will admit it makes a difference whether I can do what I claim or not. I will stipulate the so-called expert witnesses from the Academy of Science will testify that I cannot. But I know nothing of my method and cannot give truly expert testimony on it. Just a moment, Doctor. Mr. Weems, is it true your expert witnesses are not conversant with Dr. Panero's theory and methods? Mr. Weems looked worried. He drummed on the tabletop and answered, "Will the court grant me a few moments' indulgence?" "Certainly." Mr. Weems held a hurried whisper consultation with his cohorts and faced the bench. "We have our procedure to suggest, Your Honor. If Dr. Panero would take the stand and explain the theory and practice of his alleged method, then these distinguished credentials will be able to advise the court as to the validity of his claims." The doctor looked inquiringly at Panero, who responded, "I will not willingly agree to that. Whether my process is true or false, it would be dangerous to let it fall into the hands of fools and quacks." He waved his hand at the group of professors seated in the front row, paused, and smiled maliciously, as these gentlemen know quite well. Furthermore, it is not necessary to know the process in order to prove it will work. It is necessary to understand the complex miracle of biological reproduction in order to observe that a hen lays eggs. It is necessary for me to re-educate this entire body of self-appointed custodians of wisdom, curing them of their ingrown superstitions, in order to prove that my predictions are correct. There are but two ways of forming an opinion in science. One is the scientific method, the other the scholastic. One can judge from experiment, or one can blindly accept authority. To the scientific mind, experimental proof is all important, and theory is merely convenience and description, to be junked when it no longer fits. To the academic mind, authority is everything, and facts are junk when they do not fit theory weighed down by authority. Is this point of view, academic minds swimming like oysters to disprove theories, has blocked every advance of knowledge in history. I am prepared to prove my method by experiment. Unlike Galileo and another court, I insist it still moves. Once before I offered such proof to the same body of self-styled experts, and they rejected it. I renew my offer. Let me measure the life lengths of the members of the Academy of Science. Let them appoint a committee to judge the results. I will seal my findings in two sets of envelopes. On the outside of each envelope of one set will appear the name of a member, on the inside the date of his death. In the other envelopes I will place names, on the outside I will place dates. Let the committee place the envelopes in a vault, then meet from time to time to open the appropriate envelopes. In such a large body of men, some deaths may be expected, if amalgamated actuaries can be trusted, every week or so. In such a fashion, they will accumulate data very rapidly to prove if Panero is a liar or no. He stopped and pushed out his little chest until it almost caught up with his little round belly. He glared at the sweating savants. "Well?" The judge raised his eyebrows and caught Mr. Weems' eye. "Do you accept?" "Your Honor, I think the proposal highly improper." The judge cut him short. "I warn you I shall rule against you if you do not accept or propose an equally reasonable method of arriving at the truth." Weems opened his mouth, changed his mind, looked up and down the faces of warned witnesses and faced the bench. "We accept, Your Honor." "Very well. Arrange the details between you. The temporary injunction is lifted, and Dr. Panero must not be molested in pursuit of his business. Decision on the petition for a permanent injunction reserved without prejudice pending the accumulation of interest. Before I leave this matter, I wish to comment on the theory implied by you, Mr. Weems, when you claim damage to your client. There has grown up on the minds of certain groups in this country the notion that because a manner of corporation has made a profit out of the public for a number of years, the government and the courts are charged with the duty of guaranteeing such profit in the future, even in the face of changing circumstances and contrary public interest. This strange doctrine is not supported by statute nor common law. Neither individuals nor corporations have any right to come into court and ask that the clock of history be stopped or turned back for their private benefit. That is all." Bidwell grunted in annoyance. Weems, if you can't think of anything better than that, Amalgamated is going to need a new chief authority. It's been 10 weeks since you lost the injunction, and that little ward is coining money hand over fist. Meantime, every insurance firm in the country is going broke. Hoskins, what's our loss ratio? It's hard to say, Mr. Bidwell. It's worse every day. We've paid up 13 big policies this week, all of them taken out since Panero started operations. A spare little man spoke up. I say, Bidwell, we aren't accepting any new applications for United until we have time to check and be sure they have not consulted Panero. Can't we afford to wait until the scientists show him up? Bidwell snorted. You blasted optimist. They won't show him up. Can't you face a fact? The fat little blister has got something. How, I don't know. This is the fight to the finish. If we wait, we're licked. He threw his cigar into a cuspidor and bit savagely into a fresh one. Clear out of here, all of you. Handle this my own way. You two, Aldrich. United may wait, but Amalgamated won't. Williams cleared his throat apprehensively. Mr. Bidwell, I trust you will consult with me before embarking on any major change in policy? Bidwell grunted. They filed out. When they were all gone and the door closed, Bidwell snapped the switch of the intercom. Okay, send him in. The outer door opened. A slight, dapper figure stood for a moment at the threshold. His small, dark eyes glanced quickly around the room before he entered, and he moved over to Bidwell with a quick, soft tread. He spoke to Bidwell in a flat and emotionless voice. His face remained impassive except for the live animal eyes. You want to talk to me? Yes. What's the proposition? Sit down and we'll talk. Panero met the young couple at the door of his inner office. Come in, my dears, come in. Sit down. Make yourselves at home. Now tell me, what do you want of Panero? Surely such young people are not anxious about the final roll call? The boy's honest young face showed slight confusion. Well, you see, Dr. Panero, I'm Hartley. This is my wife, Betty. We're going to have, that is, Betty's expecting a baby, and well, Panero smiled benignly. I understand. You want to know how long you will live in order to make the best possible provision for the youngster. Quite wise. Do you both want readings or just yourself? The girl answered. Both of us, we think. Panero beamed at her. Quite so, I agree. The reading presents certain technical difficulties at this time, but I can give you some information now and more later after your baby arrives. Now come into my laboratory and we'll commence. He rang for their case histories and showed them into his workshop. Mrs. Hartley first, please. You go behind that screen and remove your shoes and your outer clothing. Remember, I'm an old man. You're consulting as you would a physician. Turned away and made some minor adjustments of his apparatus. Ed nodded to his wife, who sit behind the screen and reappeared all at once, clothed in 2 wisps of silk. Panero glanced up, noting her fresh young prettiness and her touching shyness. This way, my dear. First move away, you. There. Now take your place on the stand. The selection in your mouth? No, Ed, you mustn't touch her while she's in the circuit. It won't take a moment. Remain quiet. He dove under the machine's hood and the dial sprang into life. Very shortly he came out with a perturbed look on his face. Ed, did you touch her? No, doctor. Panero ducked back again and remained a little longer. When he came out this time he told the girl to get down and dress. He turned to her husband. Ed, make yourself ready. What's Betty's reading, doctor? There's a little difficulty. I want to test you first. When he came up from taking the youth's reading, his face was more troubled than ever. Ed inquired as to his trouble. Panero shrugged his shoulders and brought a smile to his lips. Nothing to consider, my boy. A little mechanical misadjustment, I think. But I shan't be able to give you your readings today. I shall need to overhaul my machine. Can you come back tomorrow? Why, I think so. Say, I'm sorry about your machine. I hope it isn't serious. It isn't, I'm sure. Will you come back into my office and visit for a bit? Thank you, Doctor. You're very kind. But Ed, I've got to meet Ellen. Panero turned the full force of his personality on her. Would you grant me a few moments, my dear young lady? I'm old and like the sparkle of young folks' company. I get very little of it. Please. Left him gently into his office and seated them. Then he ordered lemonade and a cookie sent sent in, ordered some cigarettes, and lit a cigar. 40 minutes later, Ed listened entranced, while Betty was quite evidently acutely nervous and anxious to leave. As the doctor spun out a story concerning his adventures as a young man in Tierra del Fuego. When the doctor stopped to relight his cigar, she stood up. Doctor, we really must leave. Can we hear the rest tomorrow? Tomorrow? There will not be time tomorrow. But you're having time today. Your secretary has rung 5 times. Couldn't you spare me just a few more minutes? I really can't today, Doctor. I have an appointment. There was someone waiting for me. There was no way to induce you? I'm afraid not. Come, Ed. After they had gone, the doctor stepped to the window and stared out over the city. Presently, he picked out 2 tiny figures as they left the office building. He watched them hurry to the corner, waited for the lights to change, and stared across the street. When they were partly across, there came the scream of a siren. 2 little figures hesitated, started back, stopped, and turned. Then the car was upon them. As the car slammed to a stop, they showed up from beneath it. No longer 2 figures, but simply a limp, unorganized heap of clothing. Presently, the doctor turned away from the window. Then he picked up his phone. Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day. No, no one. I don't care. Cancel them. And he sat down in his chair. His cigar went out. Long after dark, he held it, still unlit. Panero sat down at his dining table and contemplated the gourmet luncheon spread before him. He'd ordered this meal with particular care, and had come home a little early in order to enjoy it fully. Somewhat later, he let a few drops of Fiero della Pina roll around his tongue and trickle down his throat. The heavy, fragrant syrup warmed his mouth, reminding him of the little mutton flowers for which he was named. He sighed. It had been a good meal, an exquisite meal, and it justified the exotic liqueur. His musing was interrupted by a disturbance at the front door. The voice of his elder maidservant was raised in remonstrance. A heavy male voice interrupted her. Commotion moved down the hall and the dining room door was pushed open. No, the master is eating. Never mind, Angela. I have time to see these gentlemen. You may go. Panero faced the surly-faced spokesman of the intruders. You have business with me, yes? You bet we have. These people have had enough of your damn nonsense. And so? The caller did not answer at once. A small, dapper individual moved up behind him and faced Panero. We might as well begin. The chairman of the committee placed the key in the lockbox and opened it. Winslow, will you help me pick out today's envelopes? He was interrupted by a touch on his arm. Dr. Baird, you're wanted on the phone. Very well. Bring the instrument here. When it was fetched, he placed the receiver to his ear. Hello? Yes. Speaking. What? No, we have heard nothing. Destroyed the machine, you say? Dead? How? No. No statement, none at all. Call me later. He slammed the instrument down and pushed it from him. What's up? Who's dead now? Baird held up one hand. Quiet, gentlemen, please. Panero was murdered a few months ago at his home. Murdered? They didn't all. But at the same time, vandals broke into his office and smashed his machine. No one spoke at first. The committee members glanced around each other. No one seemed anxious to be the first to comment. Finally, one spoke up. Get it out. Get what out? Panero's envelope. It's in there too. I've seen it. Baird located it and slowly tore it open. He unfolded a single sheet of paper and scanned it. Well, out with it. 1:13 p.m. Today. They took this in silence. Their dynamic calm was broken by a member across the table from Baird reaching for the lockbox. Baird interposed a hand. What do you want? Our prediction. It's in there. We're all in there. Yes, we're all in there. Let's have them. Baird placed both hands over the box. He held the eye of the man opposite him, but he did not speak. He licked his lips. The corner of his mouth twitched. His hand shook. Still he did not speak. The man opposite relaxed back into his chair. You're right, of course, he said. Bring me that wastebasket. Baird's voice was low and strained, but steady. He accepted it and dumped the litter on the rug. He placed the tiny basket on the table before him. He tore half a dozen envelopes across, set and matched them, and dropped into the basket. and he started tearing a double handful at a time and fed the fire steadily. The smoke made him cough, and tears ran out of his smarting eyes. Someone got up and opened the window. When he was through, he pushed the basket away from him, looked down, and spoke. "I'm afraid I've ruined this tabletop." The end.